the Bureau of Labor Statistics issued new inflation numbers for the US for the last month. They came in at 2.6%, if I read the copy correctly, which was 0.01% or 0.1% higher than the expected inflation rate. And then that was almost a whole percent higher than the month previously. And the BLS cited essentially COVID restrictions and the easing of those as the reason for inflation numbers rising. But as most Bitcoiners would argue, the drastic increase in the supply of money through stimulus checks and large infrastructure packages passed last year might have something to do with it also. So, Naomi, I really want to hear what you have to say. I'm very excited.
You think that, printing, 27% of all money that's ever been printed last year, you think that could possibly have anything to do with rising inflation? I mean, come on. Like, Dan Held actually had a great tweet on this, right? So you have things like the Consumer Price Index, which basically puts out feelers across the whole world and says, well, how much are things increasing in price? And they have these weird, convoluted ways of determining this. So many economists just shut this down and say this is ridiculous. Everything should be going down in price because technology is constantly advancing. So if it's not going down in price, then we've got inflation that's way higher than what we're actually thinking. Meanwhile, Dan Held put out this tweet that says, a US official inflation rate is one thing. At the moment, they're saying 2.6%. Meanwhile, oil's inflation is 80%. Corn's is 69%. Steel's is 145%. Wheat has gone up by 25%. Coffee, 34%. This goes on and on and on. With all of these drastic increases in price around us, meanwhile, the government's official statistic says 2.6. Yes, that's the upper limit of where we think inflation is right now. Meanwhile, you look at the money charts, M1 money charts of how much cash is printed, it literally goes like, last year. And that doesn't even count the $1.9 trillion of stimulus that was just approved. So yes, we are in for like craziness. It's no coincidence that we're at an all-time high for Bitcoin prices right now because people are trying to get their money out of cash as fast as possible because this thing's going to explode. Even conservative people, like not conservative politically, but in terms of their estimates, people like Gene Epstein, former economics editor of Barron's, is saying in the next 10 years, we're going to have like a meltdown and US dollar is just going to lose all of its value. You've got so many things like the predominance of the US dollar. That's the only thing that's been holding it up right now. We wondered why inflation in the past and expansion of the money supply hasn't affected, the expected inflation rates in the past. And it's because of the predominance of the US dollar as the global reserve currency. And that predominance is going down. And with it, you're going to see more and more inflation. And I've ranted so long, and I'm really sorry, guys. I'm going to hand this back to you.
NFT out of your rant. That was great.
That was like the Pepe Sylvia scene, and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the strings. It was like that, but for inflation, from a Bitcoin perspective, and I loved it. It was great. That's all I got.
Good. Yeah,
I think this is the crypto space right now. So go for it.
Yeah, no, I think you're bringing up a lot of great points. It's a very textured conversation, like where inflation is going in the U.S., especially with the mass printing we saw this last year. I think dollarization is a huge part of that, which is, Naomi, you're referring to that, where everything in the world is priced in dollars, whether you like it or not. Like you might be in Canada, but you're basically still, everything's being priced in dollars just under the surface. You can't quite see it. And that's the thing that's holding the dollar up still today, even though we are just diluting our money at increasing rates. And it's like this number came out on the day that Bitcoin hit an all-time high, which is like from a narrative standpoint is fascinating.
Yeah, and it's not just dollarization. It's the fact that OPEC, people are forced to use the US dollar for, trading so many things, and that's disappearing. You've got countries that are trying to find backdoor ways of exchanging with each other that doesn't necessitate them going through the US economy. And so I think that that's going to increase. I think as we have more decentralized currencies like Bitcoin, you're going to see people using alternatives. Now you've got like this digital yuan in China. They're trying to do that, to avoid certain regulations as well. Like, I think the world is drastically changing, and people have this mindset that the US dollar is always going to be paramount. The US economy is always going to be like super, super strong. And I think we need to start prepping for our future and considering the possibility that maybe it's not.
All doom and gloom on the show today. Sad.
I'm so sorry.
NFTs hard. It's like no fun.
I'm so angry.
No, I do think what's frustrating.
Go Go ahead,
I
Ben.
think what's frustrating too is like on the one hand, right, like during the pandemic, you've seen a ton of the wealth accumulation like stratified at the top 1%. You have millionaires and billionaires that have just gotten richer. And like, when we're talking about like alternatives to this and all this money that got printed, it's so difficult because there's not a great way for people in the middle and lower income classes to like, lose their jobs as service workers because of lockdowns and then try to figure out alternative means of income for this. Like certainly, cryptocurrencies are one possible option there, but it is, potentially harder to access. And so, when you're dealing with an unprecedented worldwide pandemic that shuts down economies for years on end, like I don't know what the easy answer there. And that's like quite honest. That is beyond my pay grade for sure. That being said, in reference like the digital yuan and other stuff that's being figured out here, I think you had Kevin McCarthy, the Republican and minority leader in the House on Squawk Box today, just saying like, we need to compete with China on Bitcoin and completely seemingly missing the point of actually talking about CBDCs. So yet again, the political leaders and their orientation of this are just not thinking about it properly. And so, I don't know what the way is out there, but it's definitely like questions we need to figure out better answers to.